Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. I am back after my hiatus. I have moved from Nashville to St. Louis to start a new job, so that is exciting, but I'm in kind of a transition here, so I just set up my studio stuff today, so hopefully it sounds okay. I'm going to keep honing in on the right sound and production to make sure it sounds the best it possibly can, but thanks for sticking with me, and thanks for coming back. I'm glad to be back talking about the box office. So let's dive right into it. Per usual, we'll walk through the top 10 for the weekend of November 16th through the 18th, 2018. Then we'll talk a little bit about limited releases because we are in Oscar season. So I want to touch upon some of those. Most of them are not doing very well. And then we'll finally talk about what's going to happen over the next few weeks at the box office. But let's dive right into it. So this weekend, coming in at number 1, to no one's surprise, Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, I think is how you say that. I don't freaking know. Fantastic Beasts 2 is what I'm going to call it. So it's the sequel to the Fantastic Beasts movie that came out a couple of years ago. The weird part about it is it's part of the Harry Potter universe, but it's not necessarily a direct sort of narrative connection to the Harry Potter story, if that makes sense. So it's tangential, but it doesn't really feel like it's canon, and I think Deadline brought this up as a big issue as to why Fantastic Beasts and now Fantastic Beasts 2 are not making the same amount of money or even anywhere near what the Harry Potter movies are doing. So Fantastic Beasts 2 opened up at $62.2 million this weekend on its opening weekend, a per theater average of just shy of $15,000 per theater, which is not terrible. It did have a really wide release, 4,160 theaters. Huge budget on this one, $200 million, which is to be expected for a movie like this. So what's the story here? The original opened up 2 years ago. It opened up at 74. I remember following that one very closely. You could have followed it on the Wildline podcast. I talked about it and that performance and how it was sort of like a middling performance. It was like okay, but I think the expectation there was that it's going to push 80, 90, maybe $100 million opening weekend. Now, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, number 1, went on to gross $234 million total domestically. Worldwide, $841 million. Deadline did their profitability sort of study they do every year, contest really. They try and find the top 20 most profitable films that were released. And they estimate that the original Fantastic Beasts, a lot of it because of the international gross, went on to make about $165 million in profit for Warner Brothers. That includes all the TV stuff, streaming, all that jazz. So it did okay, and it made a nice chunk of change profit-wise for Warner Brothers. That's why we're back again with a second one. But you kind of have to think there was something a little bit off about the marketing on this one. The original film, Fantastic Beasts, just from a personal perspective, I'm not the hugest Harry Potter fan. I've seen all the movies. I've tried to read the books, but I'm not anywhere near like a super fan at all. I enjoyed them. When I saw Fantastic Beasts, it was okay. I couldn't really figure out how it was connected to the other stories, and I guess it was the same universe. I was confused as sort of a very general audience member. And I didn't think the movie Fantastic Beasts was very good at all. It felt very dour, there's this tinge of darkness to it that didn't seem to fit the Harry Potter universe as much as I thought it would. With this second one, it seems like they've doubled down on that sort of that dour, muted, gray, cold, sterile vibe to it. It doesn't seem very playful and light at all. It seems rather dark to me. And so maybe that has something to do with it underperforming a bit. Deadline really focuses on the fact that it's not marketed as a Harry Potter film. That's one of the reasons why it's not doing so hot. But here's the deal. We're in the middle of November. This is a big family film. It's going to have decent legs, right? Like, it's not going to just disappear from the multiplex. This will play strong all the way through the end of the year. And if you look at the original in terms of legs, 3.1, almost 3.2x multiplier. So for this one, let's just assume it is a sequel though. So sequels tend to have smaller multipliers. let's say it does a 3x multiplier, you're looking at 186 total domestically for this one, which is, it's pretty good. And then if you're thinking like expand on that to international, the last one did about 29% of it was domestic, and 71% was international. It'll probably match that. So what would that be total? You're looking at like 640 total worldwide, which is, it'll probably end up about $200 million less than the original. It would be a good projection right here, right now. And so that's a big chunk of change difference. The production was actually a little bit more this time, $20 million more. I imagine the marketing budget was expanded as well. So it's gonna be in that sort of break even, small profit range right now. It's probably almost certainly not going to lose money for Warner Brothers, but it's not going to be a huge breakout success. I can say that with some certainty right now. So in terms of, how long it's going to stick around, it's definitely going to play strong. I would say at least through New Year's weekend, maybe even some good holder audience into January, depending on how other family movies come out. In terms of the audience, let's sort of do a deeper dive on that. Family breakdown, and this is all these numbers that I get are usually from Deadline's weekend recap. So if you're interested in this stuff, do check out Deadline's website. They have great write-ups. They do a write-up usually Friday morning for the Thursday previews, Friday afternoon for the early projections, Saturday, and then Sunday. And that's where I get most of my data from. So the family breakdown for Fantastic Beasts 2, 18% were kids, 8 were parents, 74% general audience. I think the concern there was that the kids weren't showing up as much, so it didn't really play as strong with the families as I think they thought it would. Females were at 53, males were at 47, compared to the average movie audience that is slightly over-indexed on the female, not by much though. If you look at the age breakdowns, females over 25 was the number one quad with 27%. Females under 25 were at 26%. Males over 25 were at 26% as well. And then the smallest quad was males under 25 at 21%, which makes a lot of sense. I would have thought that females under 25 would have been stronger than females over 25. So maybe it seems like it's skewing, if you take that in line with the sort of lower percentage of kids than normal or what they wanted, it seems to be skewing a little bit older than intended. In terms of one of the big call outs here that I didn't talk about yet is its extremely low Rotten Tomatoes score. It has a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's gotta be one of the worst scores I've ever seen for a movie this large, especially coming from the Harry Potter universe, which tends to have pretty high quality movies that they put out. It doesn't seem, with these big, huge series like this, like they tend to not strike out quality wise just because there's too much riding on the line. You have a $200 million production budget. I would say the marketing budget for this is pushing 150 worldwide. So there's a lot of money in play. I'm surprised that it came in this low from critics. Audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is a 71%, but always take that with a grain of salt because it's hackable. Really easy to hack. But so there seems to be a quality problem here. That wasn't the case. I think wasn't as bad of an issue with the original. I think the original got like a 71%, 74% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score for the original was an A, which is great. Here it's a B+, which is very, very bad. These are basically softballs being tossed right down the middle, like for the audience. If you can't hit an A here, like you're doing something really wrong. So there was some creative missteps that clearly happened with this film. Maybe Johnny Depp, he's going through some weird stuff. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I'm probably not going to see it until it's out on streaming or VOD or whatever in about 3 months. But it seemed lackluster. The quality's off. It doesn't really have a lot of hype. The Harry Potter stuff has died down to some degree, and you can't even really tell that it's directly linked to that narrative. So all of these factors are in play as to why it's not doing so well. But I think when you take a big step back, it just doesn't look like a fun, entertaining movie to see. It kind of looks like a chore. And the first one felt like a chore seeing it. I was like, this is a big production, it's a lot of money, but like I'm not really getting a ton out of this movie. And this one kind of seems worse. So I think that a lot of that goes into its underperformance right here. Post-track scores for this, audience gave it a 4 out of 5, which is good. Overall, 83% positive, which is really good. You want to be above 80% in order to have really good legs. 69% definite recommend. So some mixed messages here. B plus cinema score is not good for this, but that 83% positive, which is like really liked it or liked it, they kind of group those together to get you the positive score of 83% is good. So this one's kind of a wait and see. Like I feel like it's already, if it collapses, it could lose money, but it's probably not going to collapse. We're really going to be waiting on the worldwide total so far. It's at 191 foreign gross so far, 253 overall. So I think the good zone for this would be breaking that 600 mark, maybe getting to 650, having really good legs, and then it can start making that good profit. But if it drops below 600 for any reason, I think it's going to be big problems for Warner Brothers. They might lose some cash on it, but I don't see that happening. Okay, so that's Fantastic Beasts 2, coming at number 1 at 62.2. Coming at number 2 this weekend was Dr. Seuss the Grinch. This is a movie that I didn't really believe in all that much, and I got proven wrong. I think I lost like $5 million on Hollywood Stock Exchange by betting against this movie. So Dr. Seuss in its second weekend came in at $38 million, a 43% drop, which is a little bit higher than you would want for a children's film, especially animated film like this. Per theater average in its second weekend was $9,200 per theater. Total take so far is $126 million. If you go back to my fall movie preview, it's just I forgot to update this over the last couple of weeks, but now I'm looking at it. It originally was slated to open at 47, according to the nerd projection on HSX. What did it actually open at? I forgot. It was like 60 something, wasn't it? $67 million last weekend. It's so ridiculous. It doesn't really make any sense either. It's like, it just seems like such an afterthought of a movie. You know, it just didn't seem like, you got Benedict Cumberbatch as the voice. I don't get why they were doing it didn't make a lot of sense to me why this was happening. Production budget was $75 million, but it really hit a home run its opening weekend last weekend with 67. The 43% drop is too steep for this. Normal film, you're talking like 50-55%, and that's fine. Children's films, you definitely want to be below the 45%. I would be happy if I were them with like a 38% drop. That would be good, but 43, almost going on 44% is a little too high. In terms of, it's not a good movie either. Like I think that's like pretty clear to see. 64% audience score on Tomatoes, again, grain of salt, but it is what it is. 58% on the tomato meter from critics, which I think holds a lot more sway in terms of the actual quality. It's not a great movie, so its legs are gonna suffer because of that. We're already sort of seeing that. Now, it's not a massive drop, but it is a pretty significant drop for a children's film. So we'll keep our eye on that one. It should play decently strong through the holidays. So it's got 6 more weeks until it kind of makes its exit. Okay, so that was number 2 this week in Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss's The Grinch. Number 3 was Bohemian Rhapsody, 15.7 million, a 50% drop, which is good. It had a really great drop last weekend, which I had to look up because I forgot what it was. What was the drop last weekend? 38% last weekend. Opened up way over expectations at $51 million. Its opening weekend. Last weekend it did 31. This weekend's at 15.7 as its current estimate for the weekend. So a 50% drop. It's starting to lose theaters. Per theater average in its third weekend is $4,000 or $4,100. Total take so far for Bohemian Rhapsody is 127. The story here is that critics didn't like it that much. The early buzz was not good at all. 62% on Rotten Tomatoes. But audiences showed up. Like it opening at 57 is pretty outrageous. It's a huge overperformance for this film. And the fact that you had all the production problems, Bryan Singer basically shot most of it and still has the director credit, I believe, on this, but then he got replaced because of sort of, I think, some personal issues, and there's some scandal stuff around him about his past in Hollywood, so he got removed from the movie, and some other guy took over, I don't know who, but it's... The surprising thing about this one is this is another example, and this actually was an article, I think, in the Observer today about what the role of critics are in film and the box office and the movie industry. And it does seem like they're getting less and less important. Like, it seems like the Rotten Tomato score is becoming less significant in terms of how it drives or alters business to a movie. Bohemian Rhapsody is a good example of that. It was savagely picked apart, I think, by more... The better the critic, the more they hated that movie. And the audiences just ignored those opinions, which is fine. It is what it is, but it's an interesting pattern. And I think a little bit of a shift in how the movie business is working. Critics are just becoming less and less important. And if you were following what the critics were saying in this movie, you would expect it to open at like 20, maybe like 15, maybe 25, something in that range. But the fact that it went 57, it was almost like a defiance with the audience on this one, not even caring what the critics say. So it's still performing quite good. 127 so far in its third weekend. Production budget was 52. I wonder how it's doing in the UK, because Queen obviously is just massive in the UK. Maybe even more. I guess even more in the United States. I'm not really sure about that. I gotta look it up really quick and see what it's doing. The United Kingdom, it is done $37 million, which is huge, a huge take so far for this film. Other big foreign markets so far are South Korea, Mexico, Germany, France, and Australia. I'm going to try and do, as we go into the next year, 2019, I'm going to try and expand the show a little bit and talking more about worldwide grosses, because it's becoming so important now. The domestic market's always going to be number one in the United States and Canada, but worldwide grosses is just, it's playing a more important role in how profitable a film is moving forward. So I got to focus a little bit more time on that. In any event, Bohemian Rhapsody is doing quite well, and I think a big surprise to a lot of people when we saw those first reviews rolling in. We're like, uh-oh, this is like a flop inbound, but audiences sort of rejected that and said, look, we want to see this. Speaking of flops, Instant Family came in at number 4 this weekend. It's its opening weekend. This is the Mark Wahlberg, Rose Byrne family comedy from Paramount. It's PG-13. It kind of feels like Daddy's Home 3. Like, that's when I saw the previews for it. I was like, wait a second, is this like another ripoff of his own movie that came out last year? Daddy's Home 2 is terrible, by the way. And so is Daddy's Home. It's one of those movies that I can put on and just be like in the background, it's like, God, this movie's stupid. But like, it's so engagingly stupid that you keep watching it. Instant Family kind of feels in that same realm. 14.7 is way too low for this. Per theater average was about $4,500 per theater. Our production budget was $48 million. 14.7 is just too low. This needed to open up in the higher teens and have really good legs. I just don't see it playing out all that well over the long term. It did have an A Cinema score and a pretty good Rotten Tomatoes score of 79%. So it does seem like the movie's decent and pretty good. But there just wasn't enough hype here. And then Deadline sort of quotes, they use a social media metrics group called Relish Mix. I think that was what they're called. And sometimes they pull quotes and talk about the social media metrics on these movies. One quote they have is, the negative side of the conversation, that's the social media conversation. The negative side of the social media conversation fence suggests that some comedy fans got their fill in recent years from the Daddy's Home movies, like I just suggested. So it played too closely to those older films. People like those movies and went to go see them, but they're kind of sick of that concept right now. And for some reason, this did not have a very strong marketing campaign. The marketing was okay, but it just didn't seem like they were pushing enough videos and ads and Facebook advertisements out there, or Twitter ads. Like, it didn't seem like this thing was coming out anytime soon. Usually you'll see in the last couple of weeks this bombardment of advertisement. We didn't see that with this movie. So I think that's probably why it didn't do all that well. Where is it going to go over the next few weeks? The holidays are weird. The holidays are super weird. A lot of movies open up small and just play and play and play because people get off work. I think the busiest week at the movies the entire year is, I want to say, between Christmas and New Year's. And December is the strongest month of the movies always. And so we're getting into that zone. So weird things can happen, but I don't really see this one sticking around all that much, to be honest with you. It just doesn't have the cachet or like hype to it. And maybe Wahlberg will not do these movies anymore, because I feel like he's done this so many times. He needs to like branch out and do different stuff, or not trying to just repeat his old movies over and over again. Any event, so Instant Family not doing very well. Also not doing very well, and this one's kind of upsetting to me, is Widows. This is a movie that I really wanted to do well, and unfortunately it has bombed. Maybe it'll pick up some good legs, but it opened up at $12.3 million this weekend in 2,800 theaters. Per theater average was not good for this, just under $4,400. Production budget was decently high at $42 million. This one I felt like from the moment the first trailer dropped, it was going to break out. It had a phenomenal cast, like an unbelievable cast, one of the best casts I've seen in the last few years. Viola Davis, Michelle Rodriguez, Colin Farrell, Carrie Coon, John Bernthal, Liam Neeson, Robert Duvall, just a whole group of amazing actors here. And then you have the Academy Award winning Steve McQueen directing. So you would think here that this would do quite well. Gillian Flynn was one of the writers. And so, I don't know, it felt like this was going to pop off and do really fantastic. And it has hit a brick wall here in opening weekend. Cost $42 million to make. A $20 million start would have been ideal here. I had predicted back in the fall movie preview, it was listed at 14.3, which is hilarious because it basically, well, I guess it opened below that, but it opened pretty close to that. So the nerds were right on this one about 2 months ago. I had predicted that it was going to open about 32 and just crush and easily make $100 million. And I was so wrong on that. Now it could turn around. There could be a turnaround with this movie. It just felt like, I don't know, all the elements felt like they were here for this. So I do kind of have to wonder in a very quick postmortem, like what happened? So the product quality, and I usually break it down between product and marketing as sort of why a film does well, doesn't do well. Within product, you have conception and quality. Conception is the overall idea. Does it make sense? Do people want to see it? And then the actual quality is the execution of that concept. Marketing is marketing quality. How are they marketing it? Or what's in the marketing content? And then more of the marketing logistics. Where are they marketing it? How much are they hitting the right places for their message? With this one, it feels like the quality is overwhelmingly good. But there's a little sort of caveat to that. 91% on Rotten Tomatoes from 238 reviewers. That's amazing. This will end up being one of the top reviewed films of the year. Top critics were a little bit lower at 87%, but that's skewed because it's a small group. So 91% Rotten Tomatoes score, 66% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Again, grain of salt, it's hackable, but something to note. That is also backed up by the cinema score, which was, no, I can't find it, B cinema score, which is terrible. For a movie like this, it's bad. 3.5 stars on Post Track. So again, we have a disconnect. This reminds me kind of a little bit of First Man, where the critics love it. They are gushing over it. And then you have the audience who's sort of like, meh, that was okay. So just very different reactions to the same film. And so there's a disconnect there. Talking about the demographics of this film. So obviously Viola Davis plays a key role here as one of the main protagonists. And so you're thinking, okay, maybe the African-American audience is going to show up huge for this. The audience breakdown, and I think this was taken Friday night. So it's a little bit skewed because it's opening night, but 52% was white. That's high, I think, for a movie that I believe they wanted to target directly at African Americans. The normal movie, the average movie-going audience, is 55% white. In this case, it was 52%, so not that much of a difference. The average African American audience is usually 12%. In this case, it was 22%, so it's much higher. But you would hope that it would have been like 30% and the African American audience would really show up. That's one of the reasons why it's not doing well. They didn't really show up in the numbers, I think, that were expected. The Latino audience, Michelle Rodriguez might pull that group in a little bit. The average movie-going audience, 23% Latino. Here it was only 16%. So underperformance there. 9% Asian American audience, pretty in line with the average film. So if we're taking the quick postmodern, product quality was fantastic. You can't argue that at all, really. The product conception, I think there was some like, and Deadline notes this, there was some weird chatter about this on social media in general. And what was going on was, I think there was some suggestions that it was another Ghostbusters, another Ocean's 8, where it's a female-led movie, and that's kind of the point of the movie. And maybe people think that's like a political stance or like a Me Too times up thing. I think there was just some confusion with that, and it maybe turned some people off that would have gone to see it. The hype, and Deadline has some really good numbers on this, actually. The video materials were only going viral at a 7-to-1 rate versus the usual 21-to-1 for the genre. So what that suggests is just a little bit of an underhypeness, an undercookedness with the social media. It wasn't as frenzied as it should have been going up to launch. So that's probably more an error on the marketing side. And I'm thinking the marketing content, I thought it was decent, but I didn't feel like it had enough hook to it. I was really intrigued because I know the people involved in the film. And so I had some pre-knowledge going in that sort of helped me engage with that marketing in those trailers. I think for the average general audience, it just wasn't hooky enough. It didn't pull them in and say, hey, I have to go spend $15 and, a quarter of a tank of gas to go see this. Like that's a really big leap barrier to get the average moviegoer over to go see a movie opening weekend. And then I don't think they made that play, right? In a lot of ways, it's like trying to get someone to go out and vote for a candidate. That's hard to do. And it's similarly hard to get someone to go out and see a movie in person and deal with crowds and deal with concession fees and deal with parking and all that kind of stuff. And so you really have to get them over that hump. And I don't think the marketing for Widows did that. The film was obviously great. You could say, is there something on the conception side when this was conceived that maybe was kind of an error or the wrong note? I don't really see it. I thought it was a really fascinating story. Obviously, if you read into it at all, it's sort of, a group of widows. I mean, it's in the title that all their husbands are dead. They died probably in a heist, and they're going to take over the heist to pay back the crime lord or whatever. I don't think that's very spoilery. I thought that was a really cool concept, but maybe general audiences just didn't connect with it at all. So Widows, I think, from Fox here, they wanted to open at like 20 and at least do 60 overall domestically. I think it's going to have good legs, but my only concern there is that cinema score, and as much as I hate to say it, the Rotten Tomato audience score don't look great for it. And so I don't know. I still have hope. My fingers are crossed on this one. I think it could have pretty good legs. It's opened so depressed at 12.3 million. I can't imagine it would drop below a 3x multiplier. So I think it's going to easily do high 30s into the low 40s. But again, my guess was over $100 million for this. I thought this was going to be a huge breakout, and it doesn't look like that's been going to be the case. So I don't know. It could play for 5-6 weeks really, really well. I think success here, now that it's opened at 12.3, get to 4x multiplier. If you get up to like the mid 40s, high 40s, I think that would be a big win for this based on what's happened so far. So that was Widows. Number 6 this weekend was the Nutcracker in Four Realms, 4.6 million, a 54% drop. This is a massive, massive bomb for Disney. I don't know what happened here. It's only done $44 million in its third weekend. Like, it should have opened at $43 million easily. Production budget was 120, probably a massive marketing budget too. Well over 100, maybe 120, 140 worldwide. I'm not sure what happened here. I haven't looked that deeply into this film. I wonder if the product quality problem. Oh yeah, that's why. I hadn't even looked at the Rotten Tomato score. 32% Rotten Tomato, 38% audience score. This is just a dud through and through. Disney's going to lose, I think, a significant amount of money on this. This is a rare miss from them. They usually do not miss. And when this was announced and coming out, I had some reservations about it. Let's go back and look at my fall movie preview and see what I was saying for this one. I was saying it opened at 35. So even I was sort of like, I think everybody was muted on it, but I didn't think they thought it was going to do this bad. So a huge bomb for Disney on the Nutcracker. Let's keep going. Number 7 was A Star Is Born from Warner Brothers. This is in its 7th weekend. A huge award contender here, 4.3 million, 46% drop in its seventh weekend. It is starting to lose theaters. It lost about 840 theaters this weekend. Per theater average is at 2,100. It currently sits at 185 total overall for A Star Is Born, which is such a good performance. I mean, this is one of the breakouts. I guess it would have been, I guess it is fall. One of the breakouts of the fall, one of the big stories of the fall in the autumn season. And I thought that it was going to be able to hang on through the holidays. It might. It's still in 2,000 theaters. Thanksgiving's this week, so I get the feeling that it might be able to hang on through the end of the year. Obviously, lower levels of theaters, maybe in the hundreds, but I think it's going to hold on. And then if it can ride it out until the Academy Award nominations drop, which I think is in like the second week of January, then it could have an even longer shelf life. So really fantastic performance, a grand slam for A Star Is Born so far. With only more money to make. Coming in number 8 this weekend was Overlord from Paramount. This one I didn't get to talk about last weekend. 3.8 million, a 62% drop. God, I feel so bad for this movie. And I feel bad for one specific reason. Look, it's got an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. A movie like this has no right being this good. It just doesn't. It looked incredibly interesting. I believe it was produced by J.J. Abrams. It is a movie that should have had an audience, and for whatever reason, just Paramount couldn't find the audience for this one. It looked really fascinating. As a horror movie fan, as a World War II buff, it seemed like right up my alley. I think the goal here is to get the males under 25s to show up, and it doesn't look like they showed up at all. Per theater average is terrible in its second weekend, not even hitting 1,400 per theater average. $38 million production budget. This was just, if you think about it, like, why did this one not do so well? The marketing was fantastic, I thought. They hit the right notes to the right audience, kind of the Comic-Con audience I think they were going after, like the Walking Dead crew, group of people, and that's definitely me. And so I saw the ads constantly, and the marketing budget must have been massive for this. It was shot super low, $38 million for a movie of this sort of caliber with the effects and the grandiosity of the story. That's very, very low. But for whatever reason, people didn't show up. And I think if I had to point to one thing, the product quality was there, the marketing quality was there, the marketing quantity was there. They're marketing it in the right way to the right people. The product conception, I think, it was sort of like, why are you making this movie? I remember seeing the trailer for the first time. I was like, oh, that's really cool. But it took me like 4 or 5 times to see the trailer to figure out what the hell was going on and what this movie was about. It was like, is this like a sci-fi movie? Is this a World War II movie? Is this like an alternative history movie? Like, I couldn't really pinpoint what was going on. And I think that's the killer, is that no one really asked for a movie like this. And they made it, and it's really good, and they marketed it really well. But that doesn't matter because people didn't ever want to see it, if that makes sense. And so I think the red flag to me was the product conception, which started 3 or 4 years ago. So I think like that ship was sailed a long time ago, and they did the best they could with what they had, it sounds like. But a very poor performance for Overlord overall. Number 9, The Girl in the Spider's Web, a new dragon tattoo story, 2.5 million in its second weekend. This has to be, I haven't tracked this film hardly at all. This has to be one of the biggest bombs I've seen in a long time. I don't know what happened here at all, to be honest with you. Let's take a look at this, because I did get to talk about last weekend. It only did $7.8 million its opening weekend in about 3,000 theaters. Its per theater average was $2,700 its opening weekend, and a 68% drop in its second weekend. That is just horrendous on so many different levels. The 2,600 is bad enough, but that drop is so severe. Its per theater average is not even $900 in its second weekend, and it's still in 3,000 theaters. Obviously, they're contractually obligated to play it for 2 weeks. A lot of theaters are, so this will basically disappear next weekend. But I'm not sure what happened here. Like, the marketing seemed like it was there. I saw enough ads for it. The ads were pretty good. I think ultimately No one really wanted to see this movie. I think it goes down to poor quality too. 41% Rotten Tomatoes, 46% Rotten Tomatoes score. Not sure about the cinema score, but that 41% is bad news for this movie. It's just DOA. It was DOA from the start. Probably never should have been made. This seems more like a Netflix type movie, Netflix streaming premiere or something like that. Although nowadays, like you saw, I feel like there's 10,000 things that come on Netflix every weekend. There are like 6 things that drop this week that I don't have to, I'm like a third of the way through the new Coen Brothers movie, and there's like 16 other things that I would want to watch on Netflix, but I'm not going to get to it. So it's like, who knows? It might have been lost in the shuffle with that as well, but not a good performance at all from that movie. Nobody's Fool from Paramount. This is a Tyler Perry movie. It did $2.2 million this weekend, 65% drop. Its third weekend, almost $29 million total. Per theater average of $1,700. This is not a good performance at all for this film. It did not do all that well. $19 million production budget, probably a small marketing budget as well, but it's not going to make any money. Paramount basically has like 3 flops on its hands. It has Overlord, Instant Family, and Nobody's Fool. Nobody's Fool is less of a flop maybe than the other ones, but like these movies, Paramount is just not in a good spot. They had this year? They had a really big movie. I forget what it was called, but they had an okay year so far. I kind of want to look at their like history because they were in really trouble, I think, of being sold. I think last year, or maybe like Apple wanted to buy them. Overlord, Nobody's Fool. Okay, so they had Mission Impossible Fallout, which is great. They had Action Point, which is a massive, huge, epic bomb. Book Club was good. A Quiet Place was the one I was thinking about. That was a huge win for them. But wow, you look at Daddy's Home 2 did okay. Downsizing, Annihilation, 2 huge misses. They're really up and down. You know, Quiet Place and Mission Impossible and Book Club were all fantastic, but everything else is really not great. So kind of a tough holiday autumn season for Paramount right now. Okay, so that's the top 10. Just outside the top 10, Venom's still sticking around $1.9 million, $210 million total. I still can't believe that movie's done that much money. It makes no sense to me. Let's talk briefly about some limited releases and sort of like talk about some Oscar stuff, just really briefly here. Boy Erased did $1.2 million. The most important metric for these smaller films is that per theater average. This one did okay, much better than I expected. $3,100 per theater average, now in 400 theaters. That's not going to break out. I think it broke out immediately when it first launched, but now it's sort of hit the wall when it tried to go wide. Can You Ever Forgive Me expanded to 555 theaters. Per theater average is 1,600, going nowhere. What else? Halloween is still sticking around, surprisingly. $150 million for Halloween. That blows my mind. Beautiful Boy, another awards contender from Amazon. It is on a downward slope right now, still in 560 theaters. Per theater average is just over 1,000. Not going to break out. Total on that one, 6.4 million. Free Solo had a lot of buzz. It's a documentary. It's made 8.9 million. You can't really scoff at that for what it is. That's a good performance, I think, for that type of film. Green Book, which has a ton of buzz coming out of the Toronto Film Festival. I think it won like the Grand Jury Prize there or something, kind of totally out of the blue. Opened up in 25 theaters. Per theater average was $12,500. That's not great. I thought this would do a lot better. It's an interesting 25 theater opening. You would think they'd do like the typical 4 theater in New York, Los Angeles and test the waters out. This one's a little bit expanded from that. It just didn't perform very well at all. Old Man and the Guns at 10.6 million and kind of closing out. Mid 90s did about 7.1 million total, starting to close out too. Suspira is not a huge miss, but it's a miss. I called this. Did I not call this like 2-3 months ago when this was coming out or when the trailers are dropping? I was like, looks like an amazing, cool, fascinating movie that Amazon's doing. And it's probably more just from marketing buzz as to why they did it. But it's only going to do less than $3 million total. It's already over. Like its run's over. It lost 200 theaters this weekend. It's in its 4th weekend. I'm interested in the releasing pattern on this one. Just really quickly, we'll talk about it. Opened up at 2 theaters. This is a perfect example and something that's worth talking about. Suspira opened on two theaters, right? Probably, I would say New York and Los Angeles, maybe like the ArcLight or something in Los Angeles. It does $92,000 per theater. You see that number, and that's probably one of, if not the best per theater average of the year, right? Anytime you're pushing 100K on 4 to 2 screens, like that's fantastic opening. Then the moment it expands wider, this is the November 2nd weekend, to 311 theaters, it only does 3,100. And that's like canary in the coal mine, red flag. This isn't going anywhere. It can only play in cosmopolitan areas. And this movie specifically can only play in like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York. And maybe like Toronto and Montreal. And that's it in North America. Like it's not going to play well anywhere else. Not even like Chicago, not even like Dallas or Houston. It's not going to play well there because it's just not the right type of film for those areas. And then last weekend, it dropped 62%, started to already lose theaters. And so it died basically immediate on even like a mild expansion, which it did. It wasn't a big expansion at all. It died immediately, which I exactly called was going to happen. And then it drops this weekend 75%. So this thing is done. It won't even make $3 million total. So that's a terrible performance for that Amazon film. Any other ones? Frontrunner, DOA completely. Will struggle to make $1 million at the box office. Not good. I think there's anything else. And so like take a step back. Nothing has broken out of these limited releases art house films for the award season. Nothing's broken out. My guess is for stuff that was going to break out. Green Book I thought was going to. I thought Beautiful Boy had a chance. And I thought maybe Boy Erased because of the actors involved. But none of them are going to break out at all. And so when we go into the award season, it's going to be one of those award seasons where like no one's going to have seen any of these movies. It might be like, I feel like the 90s were a lot more like that, where it was a lot of art house films that not a lot of people had seen outside of like the big cities. I feel like that's going to be this year. Like a lot of like, if Steve Carell gets nominated for Beautiful Boy, no one's going to have seen that movie. Green Book, I feel like Green Book still might have a chance. I don't know. I would have pushed out Green Book maybe a lot bigger than this. I don't know what the release strategy would work for that movie, but I feel there's going to be some nominations for that one as well. And people are going to be like, who, what is this? The average person. Okay, so that's limited releases. Let's talk briefly before we end the show. Oh, man, it's so good to be back doing the show. I love doing the show. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's happening for Thanksgiving. Frontrunner's expanding wide. Doesn't matter. Nobody's going to see it on Friday the 23rd. So this Black Friday, if you will. Wednesday the 21st, so this Wednesday, we're getting a lot of big openings. Robin Hood, Creed 2, Ralph Breaks the Internet. Those are all... Robin Hood's not going to do anything. It's going to be terrible. Creed 2 is going to do quite well, and I think Ralph Breaks the Internet will do okay, but it's still running head into Dr. Seuss's The Grinch, too. Green Book is also expanding to 1,000 theaters. Okay, so that makes a little bit more sense to me. But how is that? The per theater average is not going to go up. So, like, it's... Oh, man, that's too bad. Because it looks like a great movie. So that's this sort of holiday Thanksgiving weekend. If you are a horror movie fan, check out Thanksgiving Night on Shudder, which is a streaming service. Joe Bob Briggs, who used to host Monster Vision, is hosting another marathon for Shudder Thanksgiving Night. So do check that out. That's my horror movie fan shout out. Okay, what else is happening then? It's kind of a weird Thanksgiving. Possession of Hannah Grace, which looks so trashy and so genre, but I think it's going to connect with general audiences just because it's so straightforward. Oh, hey, there's an exorcist and the body goes to the morgue. Now the morgue's haunted. Like, come on. Like, what hack wrote that? But whatever. It's Sony Screen Gems. So they probably threw like $5 million at the filmmakers. Like, just make this scary and get like 1 million people to show up. So that's opening up on the 30th. And then we're into December. And December is weird. It's like December, the early part of December is always super quiet, like the first weekend. And the second weekend, it starts to pick up because now we're getting into the busiest week of the year. It's like I feel like the first weekend in December, everybody's just like holding their breath, waiting for this big wave to hit. The 14th of December, we have Mortal Engines, which I don't know anything about. And I think that's going to be a huge bomb. Peter Jackson wrote this. I couldn't tell you what that's about. The Mule is coming out from Warner Brothers. It's a Clint Eastwood film. Bradley Cooper's in it. Michael Pena, Lawrence Fishburne, Diane West, Andy Garcia. So big cast on that one. Not sure how that's going to do. That's but like catnip for old people during the holidays. So I think that's probably going to do pretty well. Doesn't matter how good or bad it is. It's Clint Eastwood, so people go to see it. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animated film. I guess that'll do okay. Once Upon a Deadpool. I should know more about this, but I think it's just the PG-13 version of Deadpool 2. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Correct me if I am. That's opening up on the 12th. It's just a really bizarre, God, what a bizarre holiday season. If Beale Street Could Talk from Annapurna, I think Annapurna's out of money though, so they might not exist by the time this movie comes out. But that should be a huge award contender. That is from the director of Moonlight, which won Best Picture a couple of years ago, Barry Jenkins. Also one of my favorite movies of all time, Moonlight. Brilliant movie. Okay, and then we're into the thick of the holiday season. I'm just going to plow through these really quick just to throw them out there. Aquaman's opening on the 21st. Bumblebee's opening on the 21st. I thought that got pushed back, Bumblebee. Whatever, I guess it is opening. It's a Transformers sort of offshoot. Second Act from STX is coming out. STX needs a hit. Jennifer Lopez is in it. No, that looks like a 90s movie. Welcome to Marwen. How do I not know about these films? Oh, that looks terrible. That looks like this year's Downsizing. Robert Zemeckis, Steve Carell, but like that looks really bad. This just looks bizarre. Like, why would you make a movie like that? Who's going to see it? Aquaman, Bumblebee, Second Act, Welcome to Marwen, all on the 21st. My big pick for the holiday breakout is going to be Mary Poppins. I'm going to go see it with my family, and I'm going to love it. We all love Emily Blunt. Who doesn't love Emily Blunt singing? It's going to be fantastic. I think it's going to be the hit of the holidays by far. I expect it to do at least $200 million, but I could be wrong about that. And then right after Christmas, you have Holmes and Watson opens on Christmas Day, and Vice opens up on Christmas Day. A lot of awards buzz for Vice now that I think it's premiered in a couple of places. So also Annapurna, though, they don't have a lot of money. Maybe that'll help them turn the ship in the right direction. Okay, that's all I have for now, guys. I will be back. I have a new job. It's a very intense job, but I plan on keep doing the show every weekend. Probably won't be able to do any midweek shows moving forward, but that's okay. I'll do the weekend show. But thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast.